If you look back in the history of boxing, there's really only been like one other person that was undefeated that was ever talked about as a heavyweight, Rocky Marciano. Everybody else that you've heard about in boxing has lost. Muhammad Ali lost. Mike Tyson lost. Every other fighter in the world has lost. And part of their stories and part of like their legacy is how did they bounce back from that loss? Mayweather romanticized this whole zero and I'm undefeated and blah blah blah. So anytime somebody lost, like it was just thought of like, oh well, they're washed up. And I was just like, what? I was just like, there have been plenty of fighters that have lost to multiple times and have come back, become better. But to people, like they just look at it as well. He didn't finish the job. He didn't get the championship. People are just like, oh, he's washed up, or Tygo's washed up. Puko double perfects him at Evo. Those kind of situations. And I'm just like, well, now I'm more intrigued by like, well, what's Tygo going to do next? How's he going to come back from this?
Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 49. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who was part-time TO, part-time player, and is now full-time player.
Yep,
How's it going,
full-time
John?
player. I'm doing good. I think I was thinking about it, and I kind of want to pull back the veneer on this episode a little bit. We are pre-taping it because I will be out of town next Tuesday. So this episode is being taped like right before the Tucson tournament that's happening this Saturday. We don't know the results of the Tucson tournament, but this is pre-taped and it'll be airing shortly after. So congratulations to whoever won that tournament.
Oh man, so what were we going to talk about on this episode in particular, John?
So no guests today. We're going to talk through. It was just the two of us because we wanted to talk through the roles of a TO and roles of a player, and kind of how both Benny and I have background and experience in each of those roles, and we've kind of gravitated to different ones over the years here, and especially with Street Fighter 6 coming out, we've kind of carved out specific roles nowadays. So my path has been to be a player. I decided I didn't want to run any tournaments anymore. I was running a lot of Street Fighter 5 locals, but when it came to 6, I decided I would not run anything. And by and large, the community has, the Street Fighter community in particular has continued to grow and blossom under the tutelage of a lot of other TOs. So
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, at the end of, or I guess the later years of five, like you were kind of I guess the head player of our scene. Um, and pretty much the only one other than maybe like the gaming zone that was spearheading any kind of like tournaments and stuff that were going on. There was a lot of drop off in terms of players and stuff like that. Um, I know, there would be Street Fighter 5 at other events like undefeated, and I'd help out at those kind of things. Like that was kind of my way of kind of giving back to the community because I wasn't playing at that point, like in the later years of Street Fighter 5. But like if there was some event going on, then I'd be like, hey, if you need some help running stuff, just let me know. I got a good rapport with Angelic, with Armando. So I was he gave me the reins to basically be the head TO for Street Fighter 5 for his event, and that was my way of kind of staying involved in the scene as well, and just helping out the community.
yeah, I I think it's the we talked about our like greater backgrounds as TOs and how you used to run tournaments in Alaska, and I used to run tournaments in like 2009 or sorry 2013 or so
Yeah.
for the Street Fighter 4 era. But yeah, our recent events, like you can tell a lot of them were impacted pretty heavily by the pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned Armando. We had him on the show dozens of episodes ago at this point. But
Yeah.
he mentioned that like it's not just locals that get killed by the pandemic, and it's not even not just majors. It's those mid tier regional events that
Hmm.
were hurt the most by the pandemic because they didn't have the resources of the big guys, and they didn't have the lower costs of the little guys, and so
Yeah.
like I felt like everybody who was involved in undefeated basically got taken out of the game for a couple of years because there was no way to run that tournament given all
Yeah.
the restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, that was something I didn't really anticipate personally, just thinking about that. But then, like, you saw like the announcements from some of these like smaller events that, they just couldn't handle being run anymore.
Yeah,
Just like you said, because it's like, at least the big majors, you can almost guarantee attendance to a certain extent at those places because people want to go to those major events. But a lot of these little side events, it's like, do I have the spare money to go? Like, do I know people over there? Those kind of things. Like those are taken people's decisions or other things are taken into account when people make decisions to go to those events. It's
yeah,
not like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go to Texas. Like, for what? Like, well, I wanted to go to this. Well, why don't you save money for one of the bigger ones or this other one or go to something that's closer?
yeah. And like those regional events, a lot of times they have to offset like the because they don't have the same buying power, I guess, as like the big dogs do. Like they their like deals with their venues and stuff are often sweetheart deals, or because they're local to the area, and they're doing what they can there. But like that's the stuff that usually goes first when it comes to like hardships in the market, the sweetheart deals. And so I think a lot of those regional majors just aren't coming back because
Yeah.
it's too expensive, and they ate too much in penalties and whatnot of having to cancel events over the course of the pandemic. So it's a big bummer. I think that it's we're at a weird spot now where like online has basically taken the role of both local and regional events. But locals, we can still like preach the grassroots side of it, but regional, like, I don't know, I don't really know where those fit in the new ecosystem that's arisen here.
Yeah. But like, I mean, it kind of goes back to like what I just said was like, when it comes to regionals, like you're asking somebody to take on a cost to go, travel just a little bit further outside their circle, right? So it's like we're in Arizona, and it's like, hey, do you want to go to Washington? Do you want to go to Texas to this place? And I'm, that involves buying a plane ticket and more money invested. Versus inviting somebody to a local, it's just like, yeah, can you just get out your house and drive, 30
Yeah,
minutes maybe, if that? Like that's a different, sacrifice you got to make and something that I think more people are willing to do than to travel and, buy a plane ticket.
yeah. So I guess we talked a lot about like where we're currently at, and where we're drifting towards at the very least. And I was curious about um, I maybe we should talk about a little bit about why, the why, not just the what here. So, what got you to bring yourself back after the pandemic here, Benny? Like what's drawing you to the TO role nowadays?
I don't know. I think I said years ago, I posted something saying like I didn't choose the TO life. The TO life kind of chose me, and
Yeah,
it was just one of those things where it's just like when I originally did it, it was out of necessity. It was out of kind of a selfish need to want to get things to run faster, run a tighter ship and not be so lax, right? For people to take things more seriously. And, at that time I felt like I accomplished that. And then when I moved down here, I didn't run anything myself initially. It was just like I was basically kind of in that player role because I didn't have a lot of time to dedicate because of work and stuff like that. And it wasn't until like the later years of like Street Fighter 4 and stuff like that where I was just like, okay, well, okay, now I can run events or Street Fighter 5, yeah. Well, either one, both of them. Or I can do something. And I don't know, I've always felt like that's kind of like in some ways like my calling besides playing because I feel like a lot of people kind of have, something else in them whether it's commentating or whether it's um I don't know what else you would say, TOing or just
event
any other
planning,
kind of job. Yeah, event planning or
promotion.
yeah, promotion, or being, or they could just be the player that's involved in some of these like exhibition events and things like that. Like everybody kind of has their own little roles and maybe other little things that they want to do in the community besides just playing. And I felt for me like that's always just been being the being a TO or helping run brackets or do stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, like I also see people like another role that I see commonly is the tech specialist,
Mhm.
people who are really good at fixing arcade sticks, or people who are really good at troubleshooting computers, and helping the community in that way. People who stream, and like their job is just to show up and stream. Being at
Yeah.
DTN a couple last week or a couple weeks ago at this point. Um, there's a whole production team that is putting that on, uh, and so like I just it's changed a lot, I think, since
Yeah.
we were doing it, because like I remember trying to do everything myself, and obviously I burnt myself out, but like I would do everything myself, get frustrated, and then ask for help, and then those folks would help. And so like I found myself slowly like doing less and less as a TO and more as like a promotion person. Like I was really good at social media posts, I
Yeah.
think. uh, to the point like I think I'm a decent writer. I think that's probably where most of that comes from, is that I gravitate more towards that than the actual like event stuff and planning and whatnot. But I don't know. It was weird. It taught me like a lot of basic leadership skills. Despite not really
Yeah.
feeling like a leader at a lot of times, because you're kind of doing it in service to the community. Um, and I built up an ego as a tournament organizer too, of course. But like a lot of things about like an event is a complex set of different problems that need to be solved, and the solutions come at different timings throughout the day that you then need to like have everything coalesce together. And that in turn, like having that big picture feeling, or that the knowledge of the big picture rather, kind of helped a lot in a lot of ways, like in my day job and my career too. I learned a lot about how to communicate with people. I learned a lot about how to think uh, in a macro level, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's a good role for anybody looking for those kinds of skill sets, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'd say, like, for being a TO is, other than like feeling like I'm giving back to the community in that sense, it's I love gathering people and then seeing people have fun. Like whether that's
Yeah.
a tournament event or whether that's a barbecue or that's whatever. Like I love seeing people like gather and chit chat and see people smiling and stuff like that. There's so much in our world that's just negative, and social media is a cesspool of nonsense, and I'm just like,
Yes, it is.
get me offline and let me meet up with some people, and let's just talk and have a good time and get out of this political nonsense and whatever else is going on in the world, and just break bread and have fun, right? And
Yeah.
that's something that I've been pushing for myself, kind of since the pandemic ended, and then just in the community itself. Like I wouldn't say I necessarily saw a need, but I felt like I wanted to challenge myself too, because like I haven't like so I have a tournament that I'm planning to host and at the end of this month on Monday on the 31st. And that's being held at Pure Esports in Gilbert, and that's a PC venue. I've never done anything like that myself. Like everything that I've done, it's like I've been going to the gaming zone, just saying, picking a date. They have everything, the consoles and everything else that I need. Like I've never run a PC event before, so this is something new for me that I've got to kind of test. I want to test the waters out for myself. That and like it's also been like a transition for me going from a console player to a PC player. Like Street Fighter 6, like I had Street Fighter 5 on PC and 4 to an extent, but like when it came to playing, like I was always on my consoles, right? I was always on my
Okay.
PS4, I was always on
Mm.
my Xbox 360. Street Fighter 6, I've exclusively been on PC since it started, since the betas, since it launched. Like I don't even have a console set up for this game. So I know how it works for me at home, and that's great. But how do I present this to the community itself?
Yeah. And that's like it's an ongoing conversation about, do we prepare for PC or PS5? We actually talked about that on our last show, and it's the challenges of running PC are definitely a little bit more, I think, than running on. I don't know, actually. Now I think about it, because PS5 kind of sucks. I'll just say it out. Nobody knows how to use the system right now because no one has one. Or like people have them, but they were like, as far as like the UI goes, like I don't know how it
Yeah,
works, and a lot of TOs I know don't know either because they don't own them themselves. And
yeah.
so I don't know. PCs also has its own difficulties though too, with all the different tunings and whatnot. But I would say that the game has done a lot of heavy lifting as far as a lot of the controller issues
Mhm.
that happen and pop up. So maybe the world has changed as well. I think to suit your new outlook here, Benny.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. My biggest concerns is just it's always been when it came to PC stuff. Like my biggest arguments was like scaling that stuff for like a bigger event. Obviously, that's not really applicable to me and like things that I've been doing. But
Mhm.
it's just like that's the problem I see as a TO. It's just like there's a lot of cost involved with that, sponsorships not withholding or whatever. But and then like you said, there's the technical side of things, right? Like everybody has a PC, but does everybody know what to look for in terms of like settings and what needs to be running or what shouldn't be running when it
Yeah,
comes to having a PC setup and having it run optimally? We have people in the community doing stuff like Arturo, working on this FGCOS thing that he's hoping that gets off the ground. I mean, I don't know how well that's gonna scale amongst the general people. I mean, there seems to be pretty positive talk about it, but it's just like I don't know where that's gonna go personally.
yeah. Like the tough part about that in particular is that it's the sponsors that get to decide that ultimately, right? And
Yeah,
now we're past grassroots world where we have any kind of influence on that. You could argue even that the players don't have influence on that. It's more about moneyed interests.
hmm,
Um, and we're in a different. We're like I was thinking about this the other day, like kind of comparing because everyone uses the word pro a lot, right, to describe players, and like when we like in 2009 when I started playing, people said pro all the time, but the reality was there were no professional fighting game players. There was nobody who was making a living off this stuff. Now there are.
yeah,
So like in a lot of ways our grassroots community is like the minor leagues or amateur leagues. You could argue that like our locals would be like the I guess the pick up and play style, and then the regional majors that are still around would be the minor leagues, and then the pros all play in the major leagues.
yeah,
Because I was also thinking about how like as far as like classes of players go, like they're at DTN at least, like I could tell who the best players in the area were, but
yeah,
then when the people that traveled from out of state to go play against everybody else, like those people were on another tier themselves, like Dual Kevin and Mena and Kaba and whatnot, like IDOM, like those players are just on a whole nother level because frankly they are paid to do it, you know.
yeah,
So, and then you have like everybody else. Well, then you have like that mid tier, which is like people that can challenge them, but ultimately they may slip and drown in pools every now and then. They're kind of like
yeah,
consider them like the minor league players. And then you have the locals that are just more like there's still some of them are learning the game. Some of them can challenge the minor league players, but ultimately like it's those are the folks that I think progress through pools but don't go into
yeah.
uh,
So in terms of like, what about you? Because like you said, like you were running events with Spiral Series and stuff like that back in around 2013, and then you
yeah.
did that for a few years, whether it was bar fights or whether that was ran bats and things like that. And then yeah, I think towards the end of Street Fighter Five, you had partnered up with Abe and done like the online Desert Duels thing when the pandemic and stuff was happening.
Yeah, I forgot about Desert Duels. That's been kind of a. I don't know why I always forget about it. Because even Maynard brought it up the other day. Because he played in one of those Desert Duels
Yeah,
exhibitions. That was like my chance to play a fight promoter instead. Like a different.
yeah,
Just since we're playing all these different roles on the show here, um, and that was like an attempt to keep some of the rivalry and grittiness of the community alive in an online era. Um,
yeah,
and I think by and large everybody was pretty supportive of that. Um, it's just that after a while, like it became too too difficult to like wrangle players down to actually do that exhibition match. I learned a lot
Yeah.
actually about how to treat players as far as not pushing them too hard. If they if they don't want to compete in something, like I would go and ask, do you want to do this first to 10? You want to do this first to 10? A lot of people would just tell me no, because they didn't want to be streamed, or they didn't want the pressure. And frankly, during that time of the
Really?
like at the height of the pandemic, yeah, like nobody, like a lot of people, like we were all like nervous about everything. So I kind of
Yeah.
get it in hindsight. Um, but yeah, that kind of fizzled out, and then after it started to become safer, or started feeling safer to go out and play in locals. It was just small venues here and there, pick up tournament at TGZ, and then kind of kept the scene on life support for a little bit. But during that time, I learned so much about what it means to like level up a scene.
Yeah.
And I feel like I found it in my own way, where there was always this argument, I think, from like the Phoenix players and the Tucson players, and from different personalities of like, is the scene too soft, or like is it better to have like a small focus group of players that are really strong, or a big ass scene that
Yeah.
that it's a lot more casual, but at least it's bigger, and the skill level may be lower. And it's I kind of settled on like a weird hybrid approach to that, where like I did want to focus on I started focusing more on like a core set of players and mentoring them throughout Street Fighter Five, or the end of Street Fighter Five rather. And it just I've done what I could as a TO, and I found that when I pushed people to enter my tournaments, a lot of it was about like, hey, if the number of entrants is good and the players are skilled, then I am successful as a tournament organizer. And what I was really doing was just putting it on the players to make my event successful. Um,
Yeah.
and
I see that.
that in turn, like, that didn't necessarily breed high skill or a high level of play from the players. All it did was just put pressure on them. And so like it was less about, no matter what, we had to be welcoming, right? Because
Yeah.
the pandemic made it so the numbers were so slim that no matter what, we will take anybody and everybody, we'll train them up.
Yeah.
um, but it was a lot about how do you inspire people to keep playing outside of your events to level up. And then, because the stronger the players get, the more people want to come out to your events. And playing a lot with Thrasher Mike, who we've had on the show a couple of times, helped me out a lot in Street Fighter 5, because I found that whenever a player in the local scene enters a tournament and places well out of state, and online became like a good avenue for that, it would
Mhm.
inspire players to play and level up more to rise to beat that player. Basically, you put a target on your back, essentially. And
Yeah.
like, because if I'm training in Arizona and I've got a bunch of like training partners here, and then one of them does well at like Wednesday night fights, I'm like, I can beat that guy, he's my training partner. I actually saw that in the Marvel scene regularly, as Armando and Sean would go out and play, and they would fuck people up out of state, and I'd be like, I can do that too, because I can beat Armando and Sean. In reality, I wasn't able to do that, but I felt like I could, and that was inspiring enough. And I know for a fact that several other Marvel players felt that way too. And so,
Yeah.
like, seeing how the scene grew from that was really, really, really big for me, because I didn't recognize it at the time. But then once I started seeing it occur again in Street Fighter Five, when like Jordan won Wednesday night fights, or I placed in Wednesday night fights top 8 as well, and then Mike started doing work and Flappy started doing work, the scene actually did start leveling up passively to rise to beat each of those players. Um,
Yeah.
and that to me ended up being a much more potent effect than just being a tournament organizer and pushing people to get good. It's all, yeah, it's
Uh,
really was. It's just pressuring them.
yeah, exactly. Like, no, that's a great example that you bring up in terms of like having the your players go out and do well, because like similar situation kind of came out in Alaska when I was there with my friend Weirdo Neo. Like, he
Yeah.
went out to Evo 2010, and he ended up beating some of the SoCal players. Tatsu in general that was playing, I think Vega at the time.
Vega, yeah.
Yeah, with his jury, and part of me was super hyped because I was just like, "Yo, that's one of the guys I play with all the time." And then the other part was just like, well, if he can get to this level, then obviously he's like the best player in our scene because of an accomplishment like that. But then it was also like it pushed me to be like, well, if he can get there, then maybe I could take him down, and then where would I go from there? You
Yep.
know, even if it's just on a local level, it was just like I've played this guy. I haven't really beat him consistently, but you see like what he's able to do, and what you've been able to do against them, and kind of you put it all relative to like your own experience, really.
Yeah. No, I think that again, like with in the Arizona scene at least, there's always a debate on whether or not we're too hard or too soft on players. But I think the answer is actually it doesn't matter because it's just about so if someone goes out of state and wins, the state benefits from it because people get
Mm.
hype. People the game like the game is on people's minds because they're like, hey, I live in the same area as this person. Like you just it's like from like a football team tribalism kind of deal too. It's just like I
Mm.
live in the same area as this guy. I can beat him, you know, or they represent me in a lot of ways. So now I'm hype and I want to play more. And like
Yeah.
that's way more potent, at least in my mind, as far as like coaching a really strong scene. Because at the end of the day, the benefit to that is the stronger the scene is, the stronger the player is, and I'm a player, and so I will benefit from having the scene level up along with me. You know?
Yeah, I guess another thing I didn't really think about is like, I mean, at least for me, like, there's a little bit of pressure or some kind of semblance of wanting to level up to show other people from outside my scene that you know I'm a good player. I'm a competent player too, right? It's not just this person, right? It's not
Yeah.
just these few people, right? It's just like we got some other people here too, and I don't remember what tournament it was, but I remember during like it was definitely before Evo 2011. It was like a SoCal tournament. I want to say maybe like West Coast Warzone or something like that. And Scott was at one of those tournaments, and they were talking. I don't know if it was Valle interviewing him or somebody else interviewing him about who's somebody that we should look out for, right? And Scott immediately like top of mind. Oh, you guys got to look out for Latif, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't even know who this guy is, but I was just like, I knew who Scott was at the time. And I was just like, well, if he's vouching for him, like he's got to be good, right? And then of course, seeing Latif go through tournaments and stuff like that, and going to my first Evo in 2011, and seeing him, get to second place there, that was a kind of eye opening to me too, because I was just like, man, I'm gonna be coming to this scene.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that that year and a couple of years after that too, every time an Arizona player did, like there were a lot of people we met at Evo from Arizona that we had never met before locally, like Luminaire, who you mentioned on the last show, like Mike Prosick. He was somebody that we met at Evo, and we didn't even he didn't know that there was or I think he knew there was a scene, but we didn't know he existed, and that's when he started coming out. So it was just
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, and it's like I guess we're giving away a lot of his biography episodes someday, huh? But I think that I don't know. It's just it's an interesting phenomenon where just being part of the same tribe and being
Yeah,
tangentially related in the same tribe is enough, I think. And it's not you don't need to run the event. You don't need to like create a space for players to level up in per se. Like that's obviously that still is like really important, but like
yeah.
in my mind it's simplified very much by if somebody goes out and wins, then everybody else gets better by proxy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, like people get a target on their back, right? Like Armando Angelic's gone to Evo, and he's got what, three top eights, I think, and I think his best placing was third. And
Twice.
yeah, then that's huge. Those are
Yeah.
huge accomplishments in any game, and people that are interested in that game, they're like you said, they're going to come out, and I mean, whether or not they're necessarily going to level up, it's going to garner interest in the scene, right? Because they're just like, oh, the guy that got top eight at Evo plays in this scene. I want to play with these guys too and see what this is all about.
Yeah.
right? And it's going to bring people out of the woodwork, like you said, like a Mike or whatever that maybe was kind of sitting on the sidelines and just stream monstering it up or whatever. Just they know that there's players out here, and maybe they didn't have that interest to come out. Then all of a sudden, it's like, oh well, these guys are really good. Maybe I should come out and see what this is all about.
Yeah. And again, it could be a negative or a positive
Yeah,
angle either too, because it could be like, no, this guy doesn't deserve to be up there. I'm gonna go out of my way to train to beat this guy. Like
yeah,
there's a little bit of that. I remember that with Armando specifically. Like in the Marvel days, there were people trying to knock him down off the pedestal, um, just because it was like, oh, it's just Shuma. There was a lot of like discrediting and stuff that happened because of that. And
yeah,
so at the end of the day, if we look back, like, that sucks that happened, but also that the level of play at Arizona, I believe the Marvel 3 scene was one of the highest performing scenes that Arizona has had. um,
hmm,
I think obviously we've got high placers in pretty much every game. Like I think there's a Kinetic Clash, one Soul Calibur one year, um, uh, uh, Justin's Jam in Exerd, and
hmm,
then all the work that Wrath and Marvin did in Dragon Ball, and Nice as well. Like,
yeah,
there's top players in every game, I guess, and there's just different ways to motivate players. But just like in Street Fighter 6, the answer is never one or the other. It's always both. You got to have both. You want the positive like team building thing and grow the scene, but you also want those rivalries and some of that toxicity or negativity that comes with that to really motivate people, I think, and put the target on the
yeah.
back.
Yeah. And like I was kind of just thinking about that since you brought that up too, in terms of like the mentality, or I guess the toxicity that comes with some of I guess the OG players and some of the newer ones.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's always been kind of a touchy subject for me, just because like I come from that older era, and a lot of that stuff doesn't phase me. Like I'm used to people trash talking, I'm used to whatever, dealing with things like that. And like, I don't want to I don't know. I guess I just don't want to. I don't want to look down on like some of the newer players and stuff like that. But for me personally, like a lot of it's like I don't see what the big deal is. Like just from where I come from, right? Like it's one of those things. It's like if you have somebody talking trash to you or the crowd's riling you up, like the best way to shut them up is to beat that person, right? And if you don't beat that person, that's okay. Just don't take it anywhere beyond outside of the game, like, if you need to walk off and shake their hands or, whatever, then that's it. And hopefully that motivates you to get better. Cause that's what it would do to me. Right. Like that's the kind of stuff that would like eat me up inside, and like I'd want to get better. I mean, whether or not I get to the point to where I can beat them, I don't know, but it at least served as motivation for me.
Yeah. uh that is a can of worms. I think that that's a fair outlook to have. I think we had Abe on the show a couple of episodes ago, and it was a lot about like learning from loss, right? And
Mhm.
and I forget what it was, like struggling through defeat or something, like whatever his handle, like it was an acronym if I recall correctly. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's just that is one type of learning. That is a one way that it resonates with one specific personality type, I think. And
Yeah.
the scene, I think, by and large catered to that personality type because it was so small. Like we're talking about the eras we've examined on this podcast, like the ST era or the Third Strike era. There's Third Strike CVS2 Alpha era. Like
Yeah.
that style of competition, that came from arcades. That came from your generation's style of competition, and that doesn't, in my mind, always carry over and resonate with other personality types or generations.
Yeah.
Diversity, like as far as like what motivates women to play, or what motivates men to play, or what motivates different races to play. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of different ways that you could. There's a lot of different personality types and a lot of different ways that it'll resonate with others, and frankly, it'll do the opposite sometimes and turn people off.
Yeah.
I remember that when I think it was like right before Street Fighter V dropped. The Cannon brothers collectively, like, they made a big post about how we fucked up with Street Fighter 4. We, as in Shoryuken, did.
Hmm.
In that it it was a lot of, like, it was like hazing in a lot of ways. It was like, you're gonna get your ass kicked when you play with us, and that's how you earn our respect, which is like the competitive mindset that we associate with fighting games. But like, I think we shut a lot of people. We pushed a lot of people away too, for that reason.
Yeah.
Like, I can remember even from my TO days, like, people that came to my tournaments and then never came back again, and then I would talk to them months later, and they would give me a reason, and it would oftentimes just be because the core community was too toxic.
Yeah.
So, you know, as much as we romanticize, I think, the tough love and the uh competitive mindset from the arcade era, I also think that it limits our options. It limits the amount of people that can play, and that in turn limits the skill level.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the reason that was even on the top of my mind was that was like the one of the episodes that I just recently listened to. Like, I haven't really gone back and listened to a lot of things, and then like I was for work, I pretty much drive around all night, so I was just like, you know what, I'm tired of listening to music today. Let me find something else to listen to, and I was like, let me pick up one of the podcast episodes. Like, let me just listen to it, and I was like,
Isn't
I
it
just
weird?
really wanted, yeah, I wanted to listen to the one with Abe for whatever reason, and I was just like, you know
Ah,
what, I'm going to listen to this one. And oh, to clarify, like his tag, it was specific adaptation to impose demand.
there we go.
That's what it was. So, a lot of that episode was us talking about, yeah, different coaching styles and how he had grown up, and basically like I had grown up too, kind of in this era where you kind of like, yeah, you berate and you belittle people to a point to where you have this kind of hardened individual, like kind of a militaristic, you know uh I don't know whatever words I'm thinking of, just kind of style that's very demeaning to people in a lot of ways. But it's intended to build you up or to tear you down and build you up, to be better. And yeah, a lot of that episode was, kind of thinking, well, this is how I knew, this is the style that I knew.
Yeah,
And it's, you know, I- later I found out that maybe that wasn't what was productive for other people, right? It's not the best way for other people to be coached or to learn. And that's something that's been hard for me to kind of learn too, as I've grown up and I've had children of my own, because like,
right.
yeah, I'm used to that authoritarian style, right? And it's just like nowadays it's a lot more positive reinforcement, and it's just like maybe I shouldn't like just yell at them just to yell at them. Maybe I should be like, every now and then, like, you got to say, hey, great job doing this. Like, that's not necessarily something that I heard a lot as a child, right? Like, every now and then, sure, but it was really rare. A lot of it was just, oh, you could be better, or you could do this, or why didn't you do this? And I'm like, I just had a good, I just accomplished something, and you're looking at the negatives already instead
Yeah.
of, hey, good job.
Yep. No, I think that, uh, a lot of the people that I think were pretty brash and rough back when I joined the scene in Street Fighter 4 era, it was a lot of like, you're gonna learn today, like, we're gonna kick your ass, and you better hope you can deal with it, otherwise don't come back, that kind of stuff. And a lot of those guys we've reconnected with on this show, and they
Yeah,
have softened up because they've had kids. The fatherhood thing, I think, or the motherhood thing, like, it changes people. Like, it gives you insight onto other generations and how it resonates with other people. And, for the record, there's no like hard feelings either, because it's like, in my case, I was in my 20s, and I think a lot of that mindset occurred when the harsh mindset, I think, occurred when people were in arcades and they were
mhm,
teenagers or young kids and stuff. Like, so it's just like a culture that built up over time that I think we needed a big reset for. But to the counterpoint to that is that, like, that does not help like the absence of that harshness, that the absence that imposed demand from Abe's tag there, like it does create those spots where you get, in my case, I get social anxiety from not from being under pressure. And
Yeah.
so going back to the original TO and premise here is that like I've actually found that I couldn't handle the pressure when I was in my 20s and doing and running events and playing. So as a player, I could not I could not like feel good about my play because unless everybody else was impressed with it. And then that in turn like influenced the style of character that I played, and it influenced, you know, how I presented myself in tournaments. And ultimately, when I started running tournaments, I started fixating on the outcome of the event itself as opposed to the outcome of me as a player. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I actually like I hid behind the TO role so that way I would never have to put myself in that position of being of losing and being ridiculed or being uh discredited as a player, so I wouldn't have to put myself in that situation. And that I think held me back for so long because it just makes you scared to lose. There's people that
Yeah.
hate losing, but there's people that are scared to lose, and those are the ones that I think are holding themselves back a lot. And I felt that because I didn't really take to the hazing style, because I didn't really take to having a coach that would be hard on me and putting me through those harsh situations so I would learn how to deal with them.
Yeah.
So like
It,
there's a yin and yang here. Like you got to have both. It sucks,
yeah.
but you got to have both.
It's funny you mentioned the thing about choosing a character based on like how I guess other people would perceive that.
Yeah.
Because I've actually been thinking about that for the last 2 days because with six coming out, I've been playing. I started playing Honda first, right, just to kind of get a feel for him and then I don't know, a couple weeks in, or yeah, a week later or something like that, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna play Dawson, and then I was like, I'm having a lot more fun playing Dawson. Like Honda's great. He's good. Like he's really good in this game to start, I think, compared to other games he's been in. And I think he's a great character to play in the game if that's the kind of style you want to play. But for me personally, like I don't want to play him. And in some ways I kind of got this reassurance from seeing Mike Ross kind of in the same situation because like I didn't see like the whole clip, so I might be missing some context, but I caught a part of his stream where he was just like, I don't want to play him because he's not, I played Honda because I thought he was ass in four, right? That was pretty much his whole thing, right? And like
Oh
people didn't
yeah.
think he was good, and I wanted to prove them wrong, kind of thing. So the fact that Honda's good now, it's like he doesn't want to play him because he's good. Like he wants to play somebody else. So he's been playing Lily, and I've been thinking about that since because I was looking for my there was a highlight reel that I made of myself in 2016 when I was playing Dalsum, and that it was various clips from like locals, from me getting out of pools at Evo, and stuff like that. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, this was the turning point when I've no longer become a Honda main. Like we had undefeated 2016, and that was the week of Street Fighter Five launch, right? Like that was the weekend of the launch, right?
Oh
Week
yeah.
launch week,
Yeah,
right?
I
And like
remember
I
that.
didn't do good at that tournament. I went 1 and 2. I mean, the one win that I got was the one that was on stream, where I was playing Rick Dog, and he was playing Chun Li. He did a slide, and I teleported behind him, and I hit him for like basically almost all his life. Marvin and Ernest were commentating; they were getting hyped because like I had hit him with a roundhouse that they didn't think what they didn't even know was possible, so they were just like kind of dumbfounded.
Nice.
And I was hyped because I was just like, I just hit this guy with a teleport, like he couldn't do anything about it. And this was like I don't know, it was just a moment for me where I was just like, I want to play this character. So and and it's almost like you said, like the I don't necessarily play him because of what other people perceive him as, but it's just like I kind of get like the hype watching him do stuff, and I think other people do versus somebody watching Honda per se.
Yeah. No, I kind of get what you're saying. Where at the time Sim was rare, and Sim was like like at the beginning of every game's life cycle, I think Sim is rare because he takes a long time to figure out, right? So you just automatically get that respect. And then
Yeah.
I remember when you were like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna pick up Sim," and like all of us, like it was me, Scott, and Jeff, I think, who were mainly like in a group chat talking through all that with you, and we were like, "Are you sure, man? Are you?" Because none of us thought that you would be able to stick with Sim. Realistically, I was just like, "No, he's a
Yeah.
Honda player." But that's what people thought of me too. Is they're just like he's a Vortex player. And
Yeah.
I picked characters that were specifically hard to play executionally, not because I was uh, exceptionally talented at execution. I was barely learning how to use an arcade stick, but I thought I would look cool, and I thought people would respect me if I played these characters. And it's like, how conducive to that is it, to like learning fighting games while also fighting your character, and learning all
Yeah.
that stuff, like handicapping yourself deliberately for the the hope of approval. That's ultimately what it was. And like Honda, it's the same
Yeah.
deal, man. It's like you don't want to be known as a Honda player because they eat paint.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I was thinking about that too when it came to like Street Fighter 4, right? It's just like other than like Mike Ross, when he had his great run in like 2010 and those years around that, like the most of the time people didn't care to see Honda, right? And it was just like there was really nothing hype about seeing Honda unless you saw some guy that could do like hand loops consistently or they did some kind of character specific combo that was like 50 hits and you're just like, yo, what the heck? It's like he just slapped the hell out of Zangief. But
Yeah,
like those were so few and far between. Like the rest of the time it was just like, it's just Honda things or whatever. And it's
yeah,
just like not that that really like affected me in the end because I was gonna play whoever the hell I wanted. But the more I thought about it, like looking back on it, I was like, that definitely was a turning point for me in terms of like who I wanted to play. And it was just like, what I found fun and what I wanted to do for my own personal play style.
yeah. And I told myself I would never play technical characters again after I think it was after Zero, and then I ended up,
Mhm.
yeah, I ended up, I really wanted to like learn footsies and stuff like that, and then I ended up playing this Chun Li in season 1 of 5, and she was just busted, and I ended up not really learning anything until way later in Street Fighter 5 anyway. But
Footsies are overrated. There's no such
yeah,
thing as
yeah, I guess so.
It's been a big debate on Twitter lately in terms of like, oh, we wanted Street Fighter and footsies, and then like I was laughing at all the uh the quoted retweets because people would like post like Alpha 3 Infinite or Vortex from like Akuma, and they're just like, oh, Street Fighter's always been about footsies and
Yeah,
Vega's flying off the walls, and I'm just like, I was like, yeah, Street Fighter's like, it's like you said, it's not necessarily like romanticizing it, but it's just like people have a different definition of like what they want out of the game because every game has had bullshit in one form or another, and it's got to be at the end of the day. Like I've always looked at it as like, am I having fun playing this game? And if so, then I'm going to continue to play it, and if not, then I'm not going to play it, and that's just the way it is.
yeah, I think that like we're kind of tangentially talking about the Menard tweet, right? About how Street Fighter 6 is scrubby, and then crossover jumps on
Oh
it and
yeah,
says how
that's who it
footsies
started
aren't
from. Yeah,
rewarded, right? A lot of
yeah,
that conversation happened, and then everybody kind of chimed in with their opinions. Frankly, uh, the opinion of this happens every Street Fighter, uh, that opinion is in my opinion it's played out.
yeah,
Like we all know that this we knew this was going to happen, so we can either make a bunch of content like crowing that we knew it was going to happen, and this is another way to remind people. But also, like,
yeah,
I do think I do think that it's worth examining like why a lot of these Street Fighter 5 players feel that way, and why it's different than last time, or how it's different than last time. Because we all know that when a new game comes out, it sucks to suck because you
yeah.
are at the top of your game on the previous game, and that
Hmm.
was the one you like, whether it was Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 5, or any game really. Exerd, when Strive came out, everyone hated on Strive too, right? Um, you're at the top of your game, and then you have to start from the bottom again, and there are going to be people that that you could kick their ass in the old game, and in the new game they kick your ass because they picked it up faster, and that
Yep.
sucks, and that hurts the ego. And the
Yeah.
things that the new game rewards maybe considered scrubby in the previous game, and now you have to cope with that too. So like that is like an innate thing that we know happens. But where a lot of these, like particularly meta and crossover, and I think a lot of the Street Fighter 5 players are coming from nowadays, like a lot of these are pro players, and that is different than when Third Strike, when we went from four to Third Strike to four. That is different than when we went from four to five, even, because these pro players now have a pressure to do well at this game that they don't like. They have a financial interest in doing so. They have people counting on them to
Yeah.
actually do well. And so it's way worse in my opinion. You have people cheering against you on Twitter, like those these. So I worry about the mental health of some of these younger 20-year-old kids who are sponsored and whatnot, and
Hmm.
saying shit on Twitter and then getting lambasted by people on the internet. By nobodies in a lot of ways, by people that like you've never heard of them. They just want to drop their insult and then walk away. Um,
Yeah.
and so like it is a completely different world where like you have people actively cheering against you while you're trying to play a game that you don't like.
Yeah.
That's a lot, I think. And so while we can say that opinion like is unfounded, in that like this happens every game. Footsie's like there's bullshit in every game. um
Yeah.
the bullshit happens outside of the game now, and that there's a lot more money involved, and there's a lot more pressure for people to do well, and these younger guys are getting flown around the world and expected to do well. They have the weight and the burden of past experience, like because they were good at 5, they're expected to be good at 6,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Well, then, yeah, I guess I never really thought about it in terms of that sense with the sponsored players, because like it is true, because like I think there are um games that necessarily they don't want to play, but the sponsor, what's the sponsor's objective is to get their name, their face out there, right? They get their sponsor's name out there, right?
Yeah.
And there's an expectation, even in multiple games. Like maybe this isn't a game that you really play, but they might just be like, "Hey, do you play this too? Would you want to play this competitively?" And then you enter that, and they end up entering that tournament too. And they may not be expected to be the winner, but if you can make a top 8, that's really good for us and for you.
Yep.
And I don't know, I guess I never really thought about it in that sense.
Yeah, like even I guess I'm going there on this show here. Like the reality here is I have won every Street Fighter 6 tournament locally that I've entered in Arizona, except
Mhm.
for the one of the launch tournaments. Um,
Yeah.
but so there is like an extra. I feel an extra weight when I play, because I am constantly battling that imposter syndrome of like, am I actually that good, or is it just because people don't know this matchup, or like, there's a lot of reasons for why people I think would think that I wouldn't deserve that win. And so it's kind of like it's a lot more pressure, I think. I
Mhm.
was talking to Mike about this, where like if one were to consider me the best in the state, and I'm saying this again knowing that the Tucson tournament occurred last Saturday when this aired, so I may very well like get my ass kicked and like be completely humbled, but like it
Oh, wait, I thought you weren't gonna be able to make that one.
I can make that one. I'll be
Oh,
the one
okay.
at the one on Saturday at Tucson.
Okay.
But I like if I what am I trying to say here? It's it's tougher. Like defending a title, I think, is tougher than
But yeah.
being being the underdog, because there's just less expectations, and those expectations factor into your play, and they factor into your mental resilience. And frankly, going all the way back to Abe, that's the kind of stuff that his coach and what he wanted, that's the kind of stuff, the hardships that he wanted to create for people, so that way they could have the resilience to carry that weight.
Yeah.
Armando always used to use this phrase. He would say, he put Arizona on his back, and
Mm.
that that you could interpret that in so many different ways. You could say, oh, it's because he put like the Arizona logo on the back of his jersey, so he's representing us. In another way, he's carrying us. He's carrying
Yeah.
all the weight of all the hopes and dreams of the scene and the validation of the
Yeah.
scene, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and the other side of it is putting Arizona on your back puts a target on your back, because then even the people in
Yeah.
Arizona want a piece of you and want to beat you, so that way they feel validated and know that they're strong too.
Yeah.
And that's just a lot. I think it's a lot to carry.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a heavy burden. Um, and I've been looking at this quote for like the last few weeks in terms of like, uh, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I
Yeah,
was actually like looking up the origin for it, and it's based on like it's from like Shakespeare, and I guess it's been even misquoted, but that's what it's interpreted as now. And basically, it's like anybody or those that are charged with major responsibility like carry a heavy burden that is difficult for them to relax. So
yeah,
like you talking about like the way you've started in the local scene in six, right? Like, yeah, you've won other than the launch tournament, like that's the one, the Thresher one, right?
yes,
uh yeah, other than that, like the other tournaments that you've been to, you've won. And like, yeah, it's just like that's big pressure. And like you said, like being the guy, the top dog, or being the guy, the alpha or whatever, is a lot harder than being the underdog. And like it makes me think about situations that I was in. Like I was never like, I think I talk about that on the show that we had with Tanner recently. Like the only tournament I won in Alaska was a 5-man play and trade tournament for Mortal Kombat 9, right?
yeah,
I had pressure to win there just because I walked in with an arcade stick, and I was just like, "Yo, what the hell?" I was just like, "These are like some casual people that just probably just found out from the store, right?" Like I'm the
yeah,
only person here that probably takes this game like super seriously, but I had pressure to win that tournament, and I did. But then like when it came to like Street Fighter 4 at the time, like I didn't really have pressure. Like I was kind of I'd consider myself like a high mid-tier player in the scene. So like I was consistently around that level, but I could never beat the top guys in our scene who were Neo and Shinji.
mhm,
Uh and there was one particular tournament where I was making a great run, and I made it to grand finals to play Neo. And at that point, like, I didn't wanna feel like I felt accomplished, but at that point, like, a lot of the pressure of doing anything beyond that was alleviated already. I was like, "I made it to this point, and at this point, like, nobody's gonna fault me if I lose because they all expect me to lose at this point, right? Because 'Cause I'm
right,
fighting the top guy, right? Like, there's no pressure on me whatsoever to lose this match or to win this match. Like
yeah,
I can just play, and if I win, cool. Like everybody's gonna pat me on my back and carry me around the venue, whatever. And if I lose, everybody's gonna be like, "Hey, man, good try."
yep,
And there's nothing there for me to lose, really.
yep, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Is that it's you're playing like you have something to lose versus playing like you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, or
And
like the saying goes, like I was playing with house money at that point, right? Like I
yeah,
really had nothing. I had nothing to lose at all, right? I
yeah,
was
that's
playing
a
with
good way to
house
put it.
money. I
Yeah,
did as well as I was. I did. I probably went beyond anybody else's expectations there, and I had nothing to lose beyond that.
yeah, yeah. That's honestly though, like I actually felt myself feeling that way when I made top eight at DTN. Is it was like once I got to top eight, I'm like, oh shit, I'm feeling like there's no more expectations on me. I'm gonna get soft, and I'm not gonna. I'm gonna like, and I'm gonna enjoy being on the stage too much and more about the experience, and then not play the best. And I think that's almost what happened. I ended up like waking up after a little bit, but like, man, I got beat up pretty bad up there, and I a part of me thinks it's because I peaked too early, and I
Yeah,
settled essentially, and that's again that's a kind of a roundabout way to get back to the uh, the the Abe thing again, which was like I needed to find a way to put that expectation on myself and then play through it. And traveling was the way to do it, imposing that demand by traveling and then uh, you know knowing that my friends were at home watching me and that I represented them in a lot of ways, and I, you know, if they can beat me, then they can do it too. Like knowing that I could give that feeling to them, like
yeah,
that that's the kind of stuff that you have to. It's not that you need to get you need to find a way to remove the pressure. It's that you need to play through it. You need to just carry it regardless. And it's
Yeah.
training a whole nother muscle to me right now.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know, like whenever I see like my friends on that stage, like there's always this kind of, it's like you said, being from the same tribe thing. There's always like, this kind of like sense of pride, like, hey, that's my friend up there. That's my podcast partner up there, right? Like I was just
Yeah.
like I was actually like I had just recently posted in the Alaska group like, "Hey, did you guys know I have a podcast? Like, be on." I was just kind of like self-promoting it, and then I was super close to like resharing it and be like, "Oh yeah, just so you guys know, like my friend, my podcast partner is in top 8 of Defend the North. If you guys want to watch, here's the stream. He's gonna play meta next." And I was just like, I didn't do it, but I was like, part of me was like thinking about that the whole time, and I was just like, should I do this or not?
Yeah, and if you did, like, it would have put more pressure on me, which I think I welcome nowadays. And again, to go back to that original theme of like, I ran from that pressure to the TO role in a lot of ways. Like, I didn't want to be in the spotlight, not in like a weird, like, charitable way, but more because I was scared of it. And I was scared of losing, and I was scared of being told that I didn't belong in the community in a lot of ways. Um,
Mhm.
and I feel like a lot of new players, I think, that join the scene have those same growing pains, and eventually they either they get through it by getting good and then putting themselves through those situations, or they leave.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've
Well,
seen
I
them
mean,
leave too.
it's like we touched about this briefly on when we were talking to Maynard in terms of like being on that big stage, right?
Yeah,
And about the stuff at Defend the North with the in venue projector and that the commentators being heard, Yipes and Lee Chung, and then you being able to see that and you being able to hear that in the venue. And I had brought up like part of being a competitor in the scene is like putting yourself out there, like good and
yeah.
bad, right? Like for every hype moment, like that mix up that you hit on No Need to Talk. I was kind of like half laying on my couch, and then I sat up and I was like, holy shit! I was like, he's coming back, right? And
He woke
you
up,
know,
right?
yeah, and I was like, okay, for every one of those moments, you have the moments where you lose, and I brought up like Twitch chat. Like I was looking through Twitch chat occasionally, and like I think one of the things that made me laugh was like the Porter John's been flushed, and I'm just like, oh man.
That's awesome.
But it's like, what can you say about it, right? It's just like, at that point, like you were out there, and win or lose, like people were gonna have their opinions about how you played and how you played against meta. And
Yeah.
that was one of the things that came through in the chat that I just started laughing about. And it's like you said, like you got to put yourself. It's hard to put yourself in those situations. So in some ways, there are benefits to like what Abe was talking about, and whether that's exhibition matches or being put on stream. Like we talked about the fact that Maynard was doing those money matches right at the on Friday,
Yeah.
and how I thought about going. And part of me, like you were talking about, like, oh, we should do it online or do it whenever, right? And the more I've thought about it, I was like, I don't really want to do that online. Like, if I'm going to do that, like, I want to be at
Ooh.
the venue, like, right? I
Yeah.
want to be there with people there, and just whatever, just hearing stuff in the background. And if I'm going to put myself in that situation, I don't want to be sitting here comfortably in my home and then like win or lose, just close out the game and walk away, right? Like, I want to be there in the moment and be around people. So
Yeah, and like, we talked about, putting pressure on people and whatnot, and like that's essentially what I did on the last episode. I was thinking about that when I was editing the episode the other day. Like I was, listening to myself talk and being like, man, am I pushing Benny too hard right now? And to hear that, it did end up resonating. Like I got lucky there because that style, I know for a fact I've actually pushed some players away by putting too much pressure on them. Um,
yeah,
so it's like it just resonates differently with people. But or alternatively, people don't have to go through that. They don't have to impose that demand on themselves because they don't have to be a top player. They don't have to be a high skill player if they don't want to.
yeah,
Um, and it like pressuring people into doing something they don't want to do is probably like the worst thing. But
Yeah.
if you can sense that they secretly do want to do it and they want to be there in person to beat up Maynard, then it's a good fuel, I think.
Well, it's not necessarily that. I mean, I honestly don't know how that. I mean, I think he'll do well regardless. It was just more like if I'm going to put myself in that situation, like I don't want it to be like the desert duels and me being at home kind of thing. Like I want to be
Yeah.
at the venue because I've participated in a couple of the bar fights. Thinking of we've been talking about Abe a lot, and like the first bar fights I went to, it was me versus Chiron, and Chiron literally had Jeff sitting next to him, like coaching him, and I had invited a friend out from he lives out on the west side, and I was like, hey, you want to come check this place out? To and it was almost like that situation where who are you talking about? At Defend the North, like the one guy that had like his family there, right? And like yeah, it was the same kind of situation. I invited my friend out, and I was like, there was a little bit of pressure on me to win because I was just like, well, I just invited my friend out. I don't want to like lose in front of him.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
I ended up winning that. But then like on the opposite end of that coin, like um I ended up playing Tyler in a bar fight later at what was that place? Grids and Growlers or something like that.
Oh,
I
in
forgot that
Mesa?
place.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
grid.
that place in Mesa, yeah.
The grid.
And like I played him over there and I got destroyed. And
Yeah.
and part of it was just like, that was on me for like not really prepping about it, but props to him for, calling me out on all the bullshit that I was trying to pull off on him. And again, that's just for me, that's just part of the game, right? Like I'm putting myself out there, win or lose, and regardless of what people on the stream or people locally are going to think about it, like I had to be the one willing to put myself out there, being in this environment.
Yep. I think that I have a kind of a this is a big one. I think that so when you pull up the character select screen on Street Fighter 6, right? Not that many people do because everybody plays online, but on the versus screen, the guy starts rapping, and the lyrics are actually pretty much about. I think one of the opening is like, "I've been a failure, I've been a success." Something something about diamonds. I'm like a diamond, I shine under pressure, right?
Mhm.
And I think that something that set the genre back and has set the community back is that we have romanticized salt. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is that it's like it's okay to hate losing. It's okay to be angry for losing. It's okay to complain on Twitter and to not respect your opponent. And in every video game, there's a little bit of that, no matter where we go, right? But
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that fighting games do that other games don't is they put so much burden on the player. They put so much pressure on the player because you can't blame a team. You can't you can really only blame yourself. You blame the character,
Yeah.
you blame your character, you blame your opponent's character, you blame the game before you blame yourself.
Yep, that's
But
what I
it's
said. Yeah.
yeah, and it's hard though. So like everybody's putting that some degree of pressure on themselves at all times. And
Yeah.
so you hate fucking losing. That's ultimately what the community is kind of ingrained. It's ingrained in the community. It's just you hate losing. And I found, particularly during the pandemic, that I learn more from my losses than I do from my wins.
Mhm.
Um, and so if we change how we feel about losing and we put ourselves out there and be willing to lose, then we become better in the long run and we become better overall. And that's not like a switch you turn on and off. That's not a like there are some players that I'm still like, oh man, I really don't want to fucking lose to this guy, and I'm like so that makes me less inclined to play them at times. Like
Yeah.
everybody's got some degree of ego there, but I think we've romanticized salt too much as a community to the point where it's detrimental if you can't take an L. It's detrimental if you can't put yourself out there and let your ego get bruised and let people make fun of you for sucking, um, and not be able to roll with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't for Street Fighter 6, the tone of the game in general, is all about the struggle, like the world tour mode, the lyrics in the character select screen. Like it's about it's about recognizing and acknowledging that loss is part of the journey, and getting your ass kicked is part of the journey, and that's what makes you fucking stronger. And I think that
Yeah.
that is a tenet for just living life in general. And so I feel like having the stones to actually put yourself out there and face getting your ass kicked, I think is more important than going up and beating on people that are less skilled than you are.
Yeah. Like this. So the like you bringing that up, it really it's something that I've thought about for years because like I follow a bunch of different sports uh and in boxing, Floyd Mayweather was a big sticking point with a lot of people in terms of whether he was the best ever. Like that's how he promoted himself was the best ever. He retired undefeated, and he constantly promoted himself as being, well, nobody could beat me. Being a big proponent of the zero on his record, right? And people like a lot of society, Twitter, whatever, that's like their that was like their biggest argument. Well, nobody was able to beat him. I was like, well, I mean, I'm not going to get into the topic of when he fought people or whatever, but the fact of the matter is he really put himself on a pedestal because of that zero. And if you look back in the history of boxing, there's really only been like one other person that was undefeated that was ever talked about as a heavyweight, Rocky Marciano. Everybody else that you've heard about in boxing has lost. Muhammad Ali lost. Mike Tyson lost. Every other fighter in the world has lost. And part of their stories and part of like their legacy is how did they bounce back from that loss, right?
Yeah.
And Mayweather romanticized this whole zero and I'm undefeated and blah blah blah. So anytime somebody lost, like it was just thought of like, oh well, they're washed up. And I was just like, what? I was just like, there have been plenty of fighters that have lost to multiple times and have come back and you know become better. Like
Yeah.
there was a British fighter, like a heavyweight fighter, Lennox Lewis. Like he went into this fight against a heavy favorite, right? And he lost his belt. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, he didn't train." And he was like, he had that. I was thinking of like that whole like sitting up in your chair, like, "Oh shit, I just got my ass beat. Let me get ready," right? So
Yeah.
he rematched that guy, and like he trained his ass off, and he dominated the guy the second time, and they never fought again. But to me, that was like a defining part of him was him getting back up from that loss and proving people like, "Hey, I'm still that guy," right?
Yeah.
Like he didn't go through undefeated, and it's been a constant thing in sports with like the LeBron and Michael Jordan debate, and people talking about that because LeBron's lost what six finals now, I think, or something like that. People look at his losing record, and I'm like, well, how many people didn't even make it to like grand finals or the championship, right? Like,
Yeah.
would you be more happy going to grand finals and being, going 4-6 in your career than to never make grand finals ever? Like,
Yeah.
I'd be happy getting second place six times, right? And if I went to a major, but to people like they just look at it as well. He didn't finish the job. He didn't get the championship. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's been a big thing in sports and like yeah, I could see that in the FGC too. It's just like, especially if you're winning, right? Like you get taken off that mantle and all of a sudden people are just like, oh, he's washed up or Tygo's washed up after he Puko double perfects him at Evo and
Yep.
those kind of situations. And I'm just like, well, now, I'm more intrigued by like, well, what's Tygo gonna do next?
Yeah.
Right? How's he gonna come back from this?
Yeah. I, I don't really. Yeah. It's a lot. I just I feel like maybe it's human society in general, like that we romanticize winning so much that we belittle losses. And like you can easily tell who's a true competitor and who isn't based on how they talk to you and how they treat their losses. um
Yeah.
and I'm not, this is not us saying like, go out there and get your ass kicked by everybody and then be, you know, have toxic positivity, and that you're always gonna, by losing, you're gonna get better over, like you still have to put in the work from the
Yeah.
loss. But as far as like ego strength goes and being able to take in new ideas and to evolve your play, it's way easier to do it from a loss and with an open mind on a loss, and when you're accepting of the outcome of the game. Because frankly, there's just people like a lot of that like salt crap. It has nothing to do with the opponent or like the actual game itself. It's a lot of times it's just this person expected an outcome, whether that expectation was realistic or not is a whole other question, but that outcome didn't occur, and that's
Hmm.
it. So they wanted a specific outcome, they didn't get it, and now they're mad about it. And
Yeah.
we get to, farm CPM for it, or we get to, we get to see make drama out of it on Twitter or anything, and everybody gets to make a big deal out of it. We get scrub quotes tweets on it and stuff, and everybody gets to dunk on this person. Um, and in reality, it's like, well, this probably, I don't know, maybe it's a benefit of hindsight, in age. Maybe we're getting old.
But I,
But
like,
like,
so earlier today, like I hadn't played six in probably 3 days, 2 3 days, right? I've just been busy with other things, had other things going on, right? So I
same
decided to
here.
jump back into rank,
Yeah.
and um, where am I at? Right? I'm at Diamond 2, so I'm at like 20,200 points, right?
Yeah.
And I was feeling good, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go in, like maybe we'll hit Diamond 3 today, and I don't know if it necessarily went on a losing streak, but I was losing a lot. And I was just kinda like I went up a couple 100 points, and then I was kinda like going back, and then I was looking at my points, and I was like, "I'm at like 20,240." I was just like, "I'm about to be demoted, like, what the hell?" And like you said, like, I started to think about, like, there was definitely, some semblance of salt there, and I was just like, "Oh, man, I can't believe you did this," or blah, 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 right? But at the end of the day, I had to think about it, and I was just like, why am I losing? And I had to put myself in that situation and hold myself accountable. It's like, well, I'm losing because I'm not doing this, or I'm allowing them to do this to me, and that's why I was in this life deficit situation in the first place.
Yeah.
So I've got nobody else, like just like you said, like in fighting games, like you got nobody else to blame but yourself. I can't be like, man, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain. Like I didn't hold up my end of the bargain. That's on me, right? I didn't execute this combo. I didn't anti-air this jump in, or I didn't choose the right option, when I thought he was gonna throw it, I got shimmied or whatever, right?
Sure.
So that's all on me. Like there's not a lot of necessarily competitive games like that, unless you're thinking like, one-on-one Call of Duty or something like that. But I think the biggest one would probably be like StarCraft. Like that's the only
Yeah.
huge one that's like one-on-one that I would think of. A lot of the other games that are esports and competitive are team based. So it's
Yeah.
just like, again, like it's on you, and it's just like if you've ever watched StarCraft or played StarCraft, and it's just like if you get overrun, it's like, oh, it's because I didn't what they call it, APM, like your actions per minute or whatever with your mouse and your keyboard and stuff.
Yeah. You didn't have the
Like
micro.
yeah, you didn't, yeah, your micro wasn't good enough or whatever. And I'm just like, damn, man. Like that's all on you. Like you got nobody else to blame. You didn't click that mouse fast enough, or you didn't queue up these
You didn't
SCVs
click the
fast
mouse.
enough. You need more Vespi and gas. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. You got pylon locked.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
that's all on me.
Yeah, you fucked up, and that's
Yeah.
really hard to face at times. To own that, because it's easier to blame the opponent. It's easier to blame your character for not having the tools to prevent you from fucking up, when in reality they do. They do.
Yeah. Oh man. But
It's
it's
a
no, it was a good session for me overall though, because like, yeah, I think there was still a net positive, but like, part of me, the other thing I kept on thinking about was the whole thing with something that Scott said recently about, getting master rank is, it's not as big of a, like, accomplishment, and I'm like,
oh
man, I'm
yeah,
struggling here, and I'm like, yeah, I might have a lower win rate, but this is the climb that I'm making for me personally is a lot more difficult than it's been in a while, right? Like I've had a lot more of a difficult time grasping this game and getting comfortable than I have in basically almost any fighting game that I've played. I've played against people that want to try to zone, which I think is stupid against me because my floats float directly like I've got my spacing perfectly to where those go directly underneath my float. So if you throw it,
yeah,
I'm behind you already, right? And then the ones that give me trouble are the ones that are just trying to do these drive rush combos and rush me down. And I'm just like, when is it my turn? Like, I don't know when it's my turn. And those are the guys that give me trouble.
yeah.
And then, and then also to his credit, like I see his point too, especially like I think the placement thing. I think you brought that up in a tweet or something like that. Was the placement thing is a big thing too, right? Like there's two sides to that because it's like, do we start everybody from the bottom and then we just get the whip on all these people at the iron and the bronze ranks as we as we hurdle over them because we're way beyond that level,
Yeah.
or the downside to that is that if you do really well, you get thrown in the diamond, which is basically putting you right on the cusp of master. So I see where he's coming from exactly in terms of like, well, if I get put in the diamond, I've only got 5,000 more points to get master. So that hill in itself is like you're getting a head start, and then once you reach there, like there's nothing else to go beyond at this point.
Yeah. I, I there's a lot of different ways you could take this ranking system, because even like, to be clear, I also played ranked for the first time in several days today because I've been traveling and recording podcast episodes and been really tired and jet lagged and all this other stuff. And I got my ass kicked
Oh yeah,
over and over and over again. Yeah. And so, like, me, Mr. Top 8 to defend the North, I can't lose to, no, I got fucked up by by a Dawson player, by a Marissa player, by like, and then the game kept matching me up with more and more Dalsum. So I was like, oh, they know. they know, they know I'm an imposter. So that's, and I actually walked away from that. Like, I did the thing that you did, which is I thought about why I lost. And now I'm at the point now where I think I understand enough about the game to not have to fixate on a specific mechanic that I didn't use or anything like that, but more
yeah,
that I knew that my mindset going into it was wrong, and that I expected to be better than these people because I had won at a major. I had made top 8 at a major. Whether,
yeah,
like, obviously, that, like, if you say it out loud, that's a fucking stupid idea, but that's the ego talking. As I was like,
yeah,
I'm better than these master players. These people have 10,000 less points than me. I'm way better than they are. Like, that's not true. None of that's, you don't
yeah,
know. Nobody knows. Like, Chris Tatarian, I think he's favored to win Evo. Like, he's got less points than I do.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
realized that, like, I was approaching it. My actual, like, introspection was, oh, I played too many long sets with people at DTN, and I've been so focused on long sets because that's like the top player thing to do right now, is to run long sets, And now I'm like,
mm,
you know what? I think I actually need to run 2 out of 3s more often, because these people are have cleanly executing game plans that have flaws that I can exploit, but it's happening too fast, and I'm not adapting fast enough to
yeah,
actually beat these game plans. And so I need to put myself in that blender more often. I need to lose to this shit more often, so
yeah.
that way I can cover up that weakness of mine that's been exposed today.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about having a target on your back. I mean, your CFN is the same as your name that you used at DTN. So I'm wondering if there's anybody that was just like, "Oh, it's Porter John. That's the guy that got top 8 at DTN."
I mean, even locally, there's people that are like, "Oh, I want to kick his ass now."
Yeah,
Like, it's a way you can, like, people want to validate themselves through that, and I get that. Like, the scene, somebody has to lose for somebody else to win, and
yeah,
I think that's part of the job at this point. That's part of the responsibility. It's part of that weight that we were talking about carrying.
yeah. I guess we'll see like whether we see Twitter clips or YouTube and just like, "Hey, I just beat Porter John."
Yeah, I don't think I'm there by no means. I definitely, like, I think I'm the hometown hero right now, but, like, no way or am I Hollywood yet.
Oh man, it's been a good time.
Yep, cool. Well, any closing thoughts for the show here, Benny?
Um, well, not really. Other than I guess I could promote my tournament that's on July 31st. That is at
Oh yeah.
Pure Esports in Gilbert, Arizona. We're running PC setups with 144 hertz monitors. The plan is to have a head-to-head setup since we have the room there. I actually was planning to go there um, in a couple days and kind of test everything and set everything up, see how things were going to go. Uh, I did find out that the venue's AC went out today or yesterday, so
Oh,
that should be fixed. I mean, if it's not fixed within like the next week or two, then that's a problem.
Yeah,
I'll keep my
if it's a PC cafe, like, can they even open? Because the computers would overheat.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, just the venue in general with people in there, that would be too much, especially
Yeah.
here because it's been heat wave here. It's been like 110 and above like for like a week. It sucks.
Yep. Super hot here in Arizona. Well, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/spiral series, Twitch at twitch.tv/spiral series, and by searching on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for Absolute Guard. This has been the Absolute Guard podcast. I'm Porta John, and there's Benny. We're doing this new outro thing. I'm trying it out. I don't know if it's working out so well, but
Hey, you
uh,
got the steal right though. No
I did get the
interruption.
spiel. Yeah, that one I actually did. Like, we're getting there. We're getting there. Anyway, have a good night, all. Take care.
Yep. Later, guys.